This year, the NFHS is starting its alumnus interview of a former section or National Spirit of Sport Award or Heart of the Arts Award winner to be interviewed by the State Associate Executive Director. The participants in this year's alumnus interview are Delaware Interscholastic Athletic Association Executive Director Kevin Charles and Grace Firestone, the 2012 Spirit of Sport Award Section 2 recipient. Kevin and I would like to welcome Grace and you to the show.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's an honor for the First State to be a part of the inaugural alumnus interview. And I'm very pleased to have with me today a very special young lady, Grace Firestone from Wilmington, Delaware. Grace was the 2012 Section 2 Spirit of Sport Award recipient. Grace, a welcome to the alumnus interview.
Thank you, Kevin. It is a pleasure to be here.
Grace embodied what Spirit of Sport was all about. Academically, she attended Tower Hill School, one of the top academic schools in the state, and finished in the top 10 in her class. Athletically, Grace lettered 15 times in 3 sports, volleyball, basketball, and soccer. She won a state championship with her soccer team in her junior year and was all-state in all 3 sports. As a leader, she was class president and selected to present her class graduation speech. But what impressed me most about Grace was her community service. I first met Grace as an attendee of the DIAA Student Leadership Conference as a rising junior, and already she had created a foundation called Let the Kids Play. Grace, tell us a little bit about Let the Kids Play.
Well, after I had completed the 40 hours of community service that was required by Tower Hill, I wanted to develop a self-initiated project in which I could become more invested. So then came Let the Kids Play, with the goal to provide disadvantaged youth with sports equipment. It started strictly as a program to donate equipment, but I quickly realized that funding was also necessary for these inner-city athletic programs. So we began by fundraising through my high school volleyball team. We had each player get 5 sponsors to donate 25 cents per ace that our team scored throughout the season. We also created and sold t-shirts, and then we also held a school-wide student dodgeball tournament to raise funds to Let the Kids Play. So when I attended the DIAA Student Leadership Conference, I had the idea to leverage Let the Kids Play through other schools in the conference. And so through junior and senior years, altogether, we raised over $5,000. And then after connecting with the Flying Kites Orphanage in Kenya in my senior year, I had post-grad plans to expand and continue Let the Kids Play abroad.
So Grace, at this point in our discussion, you've graduated from high school. And in Delaware, there's a long-standing tradition that the seniors immediately head down to the beach for a week after graduation. All your friends went down, but you decided to stay home. Tell us why and what happened over the summer.
Well, my initial decision to stay home was based on my hope to play Division I varsity soccer in college. And so 2 days after graduation, I went to the local YMCA and to start that training program. But then I went home, I had some dinner, and then around 11:30 at night, I went up to my mom's room, said I don't feel so well, and collapsed on her bed. She immediately called 911, and she laid me on my back. She then called my brother, Grant, who she thought was out of the house. He happened to be home, so he sprinted downstairs and started CPR. He administered CPR for the 3 minutes that it took the EMTs to arrive at my house. So the EMTs took over the administration of CPR. Police were also searching my house for drugs to figure out why a healthy 18-year-old would be on the floor in sudden cardiac arrest. Paramedics also used an AED to shock my heart back into normal rhythm. And because my veins were actually shutting down at that point, they drilled into my shin bone marrow to get essential IV fluid to my vascular system. So I was then transported to Christiana Hospital, And I was put on ice in what is called therapeutic hypothermia in order to preserve brain function and prevent organ damage. In total, I spent about 10 days in the hospital, during which they implanted a defibrillator in my left chest. And while I was in the hospital, a nurse came in to give a neuropsych evaluation. And in that test, I was to connect the scrambled letters of the alphabet and draw a 3D box. I could not do it. And that's when I understood the gravity of the situation and that there wasn't much I could do about it.
Well, Grace, thank God that you didn't go to the beach, first of all, and thank God your brother Grant was at home and knew how to administer CPR. And Grace, we know that for every minute that goes by in a sudden cardiac arrest event, the chance of survival decreases by 10%, as does the return to normal function. Tell us about your limitations and what was recovery like for you?
Well, leaving the hospital was almost like a rebirth to me. Because of short-term memory loss that was due to oxygen deprivation during my event, I had to start cognitive therapy about 3 times a week. Physically, I was limited to 25 minutes of walking on a treadmill, and that was to reacclimate and kind of adjust to this new device in my body. But by the end of the summer, I was making significant strides. But the physicians were still, advising me to take some time off from school and limit physical activity. At that time, I felt as though, my doctors and my family and my friends were placing limits on my abilities. And I decided then that I was not going to accept living in a restricted bubble for the rest of my life. So that August, I was able to start in the honors program at UD as a biology major, and I snuck my cleats in the car on the way to school. When I made the club soccer team, I called my physician to gain his approval. He said he would prefer if I waited at least 6 months until serious activity. I initially was devastated, and then I decided that prefer was an interesting word, and I was playing full games by the end of the season.
Yeah. Well, so let me get this straight, Grace. On June 6th, you survived a near-fatal sudden cardiac arrest, spent 10 days in the hospital, literally had to retrain yourself mentally, physically, and yet 3 short months later, you're at the University of Delaware in the honors program as a bio major, which was pretty tough for me. I don't know what it was like for you. And you're playing university club soccer. That's incredible to me. And yet, you felt limits were still being placed on you by your family, your friends, your physicians, and you had to have some self-doubts too. How'd you free yourself from those limitations?
Well, in college, I became more and more invested in flying kites, who I mentioned earlier, and I discovered that they offered adventure challenges in various locations around the world. So I particularly became interested in the New Year's Eve climb of Mount Kilimanjaro. But to participate, the caveat was you had to raise $6,000 for the kids. So from August to December of my sophomore year in college, we ended up raising over $10,000 for the Flying Kites Orphanage. That allowed me not only to climb the mountain, but to spend an additional 3 weeks with the kids that we had just raised the money for. And I think that the inspiration was external and internal. I needed to prove to myself and to others that I was physically more capable than I was told to be. And the climb was, of course, a huge physical challenge, but it was more so a nonprofit venture that was bigger than any one individual.
Well, Grace, the physical climb of 19,341 feet to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro is a daunting challenge for anyone, let alone someone who survived a near-fatal sudden cardiac arrest just 18 months earlier. I imagine that reaching the summit must have been an emotional, almost spiritual moment for you. We have a photo coming up here that has you in front of a sign with a word that has special meaning to you. Tell us about that.
So during my trip to Africa, I learned a lot of things, but in particular, I learned that uhuru literally means freedom in Swahili. But for me, I think that the translation symbolized a personal freedom from the word can't, and the finish line of an extremely exhausting upward climb. But really, I understood that no longer would my mom have to worry about me when I went on runs around the neighborhood, and no longer would my doctor question my safety while playing sports,
Right.
and no longer would I be scared or doubtful of adventure or challenge in the future of either physical or mental strength.
Grace, I've heard your story several times. It inspires me every time I hear you tell it. I know you just recently graduated from the University of Delaware. What are your future plans?
So to prepare for medical school, I'm gaining clinical experience at Omega Medical Center in Delaware, where I currently work. And I do plan eventually to enter the field of cardiology. And
so as a cardiology, you'll be taking everything full circle by helping others, in this case, others who have similar health experiences as you've had, and in doing so, once again, embracing the spirit of sport.
Thank you, Kevin, and it has been a true honor working with you.
Well, thank you, Grace. I appreciate that. And we have a little token of appreciation for your sharing your speech with us today, your story. And we thank you very much for that. Good job. Good.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Grace. Grace, you are truly an inspiration to all of us. You make us all want to do more for those in our charge.